Okay, so the book is called Make College Your Superpower, so the book really is about empowering young people in the application cycle so that you don't feel like you're being dictated to, not so much about your parents or your counselors at high school, but more about the system because so many young people feel um, sort of overwhelmed by applications. And so just a little bit about myself. I was born in New York to Japanese parents. I grew up in Chappaqua, so not that far away from where you guys are. Originally, I worked as a journalist. I was in Tokyo, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and then also in New York. I led an international education research service at the British Council that was based in Hong Kong. I lived in Hong Kong for many years. And then I moved to California. I recruited international students for UC Berkeley, based in California. And then I currently conduct research for universities and edtech companies like Duolingo. And then I wrote a book.
Oh wow.
Um, and the book I wrote basically because I've been aggregating so much information and then also through my work for Forbes that I thought I might be able to compile my findings. And I've gotten blurbs from people like Mark Randolph. He's the co-founder and CEO of Netflix, who I think he can see that Make College a Superpower. It's not where you go, it's what you know. It's really becoming a knowledge economy. So less driven by brand, although obviously brand is still king, but it is about more about the skills and the competencies that you learn at university. So I have to say, Asha, and also to your mom, this is actually a very good time to be a student, even though I'm sure it feels very overwhelming to you right
Yeah,
now.
a little bit.
Yeah, no, but listen, I have some good news for you towards the end of my presentation. So today I thought we would just go over some core findings,
Mhm.
some trends to be aware of for this particular admission cycle. I can give you some granular tips and then about tailoring your application to reflect your true self. So as I mentioned before, it's a great time to be a student. I know it does not feel that way. It feels overwhelming, very competitive, a lot of pressure. And believe me, I'm not underestimating all of that. And I'm sure also extracurricular, that you're scheduled to the max, and I'm sure you had to give up something to be to attend this meeting. But it is a great time to be a student because there's so much change going on right now. And as you may know, whenever there's a change, like a pivot, and right now it's because of tech and even more because of AI, there are a lot of challenges because of those issues, but at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity. So believe it or not, it really is a great time to be a student, especially if you graduate 4 years from now. At the rate things are going right now, you really can't predict what it's going to be, what it's going to look like. The one thing I can say, though, as we shift away from brand, the focus is more about students and graduates who are kind of abreast of the trends. So people that are first, or at least close to being first, in terms of seeing how the economy is changing, and a lot of that is innovation, as you probably know. The one thing I can say for you is that being a young person, you live in a culture of convenience, and a lot of that is because of innovation. And if you're using Venmo, you're using Uber, you're using any of those apps that make your life so much easier, you don't really care where that person went to university. All you care about is how relevant that app is to your life and how easy it makes your life. So this is why I think it's a great time to be a student. So let's talk a little bit about rankings, which I'm sure has become such a big issue for kids in your high school, because I'm sure you go to a very good high school, kids in a lot of high schools across the United States, as a matter of fact, around the world, and the admissions game. I don't know if you're planning on applying to NYU, but NYU is a very good example of what's going on right now with universities. If you look at the bottom here, excuse me, it's 2018. That is the year, the graduating year. So those are students that applied in 2014 to be class of 2018. And if you look, the applications they received then were 52,000 applications, which is a good number of applications. And the admissions rate, or the acceptance rate, was about 36%, which is a decent. I mean, it's selective. I would not say it's hugely selective, and it's certainly not highly selective. But if you go up from the years from the graduating class of 2018 and you see 2019, 2020, et cetera, you'll see that the acceptance rate is narrowing. So it goes from 36 in 1 year, it goes from 36 to 30, 29, 27, it gets progressively smaller. If you look at the applications received, they go from 52,000, climbing 60, 63, 67, jumps to 75. And as we look at the accepted applications, they also narrows. And I don't know, I'm not quite sure about why the number of places decreased. It could be that they let in a lot of students because they wanted to fill the ranks, but as the school became more popular, they decided to make the school somewhat smaller so that the kids would have better attention, or maybe they were increasing the tuition so they didn't need as many students. But anyway, if you see the graduating class of 2026, which they're going to graduate in 2 years, they received 105 applications. So we're talking double the number of applications for the class of 2018. And the admissions rate has shrunk to 12.20. So when we're talking about rankings and how people have become so focused on rankings, part of that is because, or a large degree of that is because there are just more applications. And if you look at the class of 2027, they received 120,000 applications, and the acceptance rate is now 8%, which is what, believe it or not, that's what Harvard was in 2019. So the rankings game, certainly NYU is a great school, Harvard is a great school, but the rankings and the acceptance rates narrowing, a lot of that is because there's just more students applying to university. And the reason for that is baby boomers who were born, people that were born maybe in the 60s, also into maybe the late 50s, 60s, they had more money, they had children, and they were able to put their kids into university. So that generation had a lot of kids that could afford to go to university, so there are more students applying. So the rankings game, it's good to know that it is simply a numbers game. So this is a question that was on the Common App a few years ago about reflecting on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea.
Yeah, it's still a prompt.
Oh, is it still a prompt?
Yeah, they have 7 prompts this year, and that's one of them, I think. Yeah.
Okay, well, this is good then. So I'm sure it's top of mind for you. But the thing I want to challenge you is, if the rankings game is something that, I went to school quite a long time ago, people wanted to go to the Ivy League, et cetera, but the economy has changed so much. Back in the day when I was growing up, and maybe even your mom, like the big companies were Walmart or Citibank or oil companies. Those were the big players, and that in that economy, people wanted to go to the Ivy League, they wanted to go to MIT because of what those schools kind of, the skills that you gained by going to those schools. If you look at the top most powerful companies today, they're all going to be the big tech companies. You know exactly who they are. They're not moving at all. So the question is, why are we still in that frame of mind, the belief that brand is best, rankings is best, when the economy has been completely turned on its head? So you can write about that, but it really is, we should pivot our thinking to accommodate the way that the economy has changed. So if I can just pivot a little bit to study, I think a lot of people like yourself who may be overwhelmed by the college application process, you might be like, oh my goodness, I honestly don't even know what I'm going to study. I don't know I'm just going to be undeclared. But my advice to you is just to point yourself in a direction, because sometimes if you go into blank, you're going to only react to the people around you, and people will be sort of pointing you in a direction. But if you go in with, like, I'm a humanities person, I'm a math person, I'm a sciences person, even those vague parameters, you have something to work off of. There's more sense of dynamics in that, because you're going in sort of dynamic rather than going in sort of blank. So you don't need to make a very narrow choice, like I'm going to study finance or I'm going to study environmental science. But I think it's a good idea to sort of just think a little bit about the parameters. Are you humanities? Are you STEM? Are you right brain, left brain? Those kinds of, just make those kind of broad decisions. And I'm sure that you're hearing a lot of people, or maybe not, but the whole thing about following your passion. I think a good thing is to also follow your competencies. Sometimes what you're passionate about may not necessarily be something that you're good at, and it also might not be something that the market needs. So I think a good way to do it is to more to focus about the things that bring you joy in your school life, And then maybe by looking at some salary data, or look at the sort of the economic stories, business stories in the newspaper about the jobs, about the areas where there is employment. I mean, an example, Jeff Bezos, he originally wanted to be an astronaut. I don't think when he was growing up that he wanted to do e-commerce or sell books on the internet, but I think he spotted a niche or an area that was ripe for to be exploited. And I think he's obviously a smart man. I think he worked in investment banking, so he was able to use his competencies, which were in business, to focus on an area where he knew he could succeed. And right now, as I'm sure you know, he does have his own sort of space endeavors that he funds with his billions of dollars, right? So, but he did not aim to be an astronaut. And I think there are a lot of other examples of tech people. And Mark Randolph, I don't think when Netflix, I mean, I don't know if you're old enough to know this, but Netflix originally was putting sort of DVDs in a manila envelope and mailing it to people. That certainly was not his dream, but he saw that there was a niche for entertainment, and then he pivoted from those DVDs to streaming, because that's the way he saw the market going. So again, that's a little bit about being first, being astute to the market, and being first. And that's what makes being a university graduate now so exciting. There's so many opportunities like that. Again, just to pivot back to, what you might want to study. A lot of young people want to study STEM. They want to study computer science because they think it's a tech economy. I'm going to study computer science. I want to study machine learning, and then my career is golden. I'm going to be a product manager at Apple. But if you look at what happened last year, and I'm sure you've seen it on social media, there have been tech layoffs left and right. And I know that not all of them are tech related. A lot of them are the support staff for tech jobs, HR, marketing. Those are always the first to go. That a lot of the HR function has been automated with AI. The marketing, if you're not releasing as many products, you don't need as much marketing. But some of them are tech jobs because there's so many resources now being invested in AI, which is very expensive. It draws it requires a lot of resources. So companies are indeed streamlining their staff. Earlier this year in January, SAP, Unity, Wayfair, layoffs across the board. Microsoft, also a major tech company, laying off. I think they've laid off more since January. And again, this is more recent. Intel laid off 15% of their total workforce. These are huge numbers. And Dell laid off 10% of the overall staff. And they said they're pivoting to a leaner company, meaning they're streamlining their staffs. And I think, again, a lot of it is supporting staff, but some of it is staff that were working on projects that they're either are sort of putting on the back burner, or maybe they've sort of ceased interest in investing in. And maybe there are areas like apps, which you can develop. Like the everyday person can now develop apps, or maybe it's video game development. There are a lot of areas where AI is infiltrating. So I think actually to be just like to say you're tech and that's good enough, I'm STEM, is no longer good enough. So in the age of AI, and you might hear this, you will hear this at university, as a matter of fact, the name of the game is interdisciplinary, which means you no longer are just one thing, which is a good thing, because you are more than one thing. Is to mix, even if you're a science math geek, that you take humanities, that you are able to converse, to write down your ideas, to collaborate with others. And if you're a humanities geek, and a lot of them take great pride that they can't do math, they do need to have basic tech skills, math skills, because nobody's job is, even at university, even if you're an English professor, you will need to deal with tech. So interdisciplinary is the name of the game. I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. I'm sure you have a mobile phone, that young people today, when they have a mobile phone, they go to great lengths. These are all sections in my book they know how, the pros and cons of each model, like a Samsung versus an iPhone, and the cost differential, and which camera is better, and what will the trade-in be, and how do I upgrade? But when it comes to their education, I think people are not as aware of the cost because it's overwhelming or it's too onerous or it feels too abstract. But I do think the more you understand about the debt you're taking on, if you are going to apply via FAFSA, if you want to apply for scholarships, the tuition of in-state, out-of-state for public universities, the cost of an Ivy League university versus perhaps a less prestigious university, maybe doing community college for 2 years and then transferring to a public university if you're going to do that in California or New York or something like that. I think it's better to understand the finances behind a university, because that's when you'll feel like you have some agency over it. I think feeling overwhelmed, part of it is because there's lack of knowledge. And I know that you're busy and the academics are first and foremost, but part of that too is also understanding what it means to invest in a university education. And I wanted to say too, and I don't know if students in the United States are thinking that much about studying overseas, but if you do want to study at Harvard, even though you don't have the grades to do so, you could study at the best schools at universities around the world, which are not that expensive. You could study at Oxford or Cambridge. I think the acceptance rates at those universities are probably about 30%, which compared to the very narrow 4%, 3% acceptance rate at the Ivy Leagues right now. And the cost is much less expensive, that the universities there also love international students. They love American students because American students are adventurous and to some degree and are adaptable. In my next slide, if you're ever interested in going to Tokyo, tuition for 1 year at the University of Tokyo, which is the top university in Japan. And it's also, they have curriculum in English. You don't need to know how to speak Japanese, although you can learn how to speak Japanese, is 3,500 a year. So best university in Japan, which you'll have language study, you get internships in Tokyo, you will live in one of the greatest cities in the world. The cost of living is very low now because the dollar is strong, the yen is very weak, is a fraction of one semester at a university in the United States if you go to a private university. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that about Scotland. And I'm so glad that your friend did that. There are options. There are global options. There are options in India. There are options in China. And you can go to graduate school in the United States. You could do 4 years in Edinburgh, save the money, and then do 2-year MBA, 3-year law degree at a top school, because you're going to come in with an amazing international credential. It's a way to differentiate. If you plan on going to graduate school, it's a very good way to differentiate yourself, is to have an international undergraduate degree from a very good school. So I'm glad that that your friend is doing that. It's a great example. And I wanted to say too that with regards to networking, which is we're just projecting a little bit post-graduation, it really is about your ability to network. Young people today, so lucky that you guys have been essentially networking since you had access to the internet. So it's no longer the old school networking, which was like going to cocktail parties or going to like alumni mixers, and it was all in person. It's about LinkedIn, even Instagram, Facebook to some degree. It is about your ability to network, but it is your ability to network actively. And it's just because you go to a great school and you have access to their alumni network, it won't come to you. You have to be strategic about your strategy, how to reach people. I have to say the blurb I got from Mark Randolph, who is one of the most successful tech people on the planet, it was about strategy. I don't know him, but I was able to get that blurb because of my ability to write, because I'm a humanities geek, and my ability to reach out to him through LinkedIn. So anyway, it's not about the grades, it's about how well you can network. That will also lead to your success. And I don't know if this is relevant to you, but for many jobs, the federal government, many states, I think Pennsylvania might be one of them, IBM, Salesforce, a lot of companies have removed the requirement that you have a university degree to apply for jobs. I think from certain jobs, that the higher level jobs, you probably should have a university degree, although there are many tech leaders who don't have university degrees. So I think as long as if you have, it's not, when it's about what you know, it's not about where you go. I think that really highlights, it's about the knowledge and skills that you bring to the table, 100%. The hard truth about higher ed, and you may know this, higher education is in the United States, I would say pretty clearly, aside from maybe the top 30, 50 schools, is financially a mess. Most universities cannot make their enrollments. They are running deficits. I would say Marquette University is running they're cutting their budget by $31 million. University of UC Santa Cruz, one of a very popular UC school, just announced a $126 million deficit in the fiscal year. There aren't enough students that are enrolling in their schools. And you may not feel that way if you're applying to the top 30 schools, which maybe you are. You might feel like you're just a grain of sand, but higher ed overall, the enrollments have been declining for 10 years, and they are going to continue to decline. There's no rebound really in sight. So I want to talk about 5 trends to look for in this admission cycle. So they apply to you as a senior right now. Believe it or not, getting into university will get easier. And I don't want you to think that it's going to get easier to get into Yale. It'll never be easy to get into Yale or any school in the Ivy League or those Ivy League adjacent schools, MIT, Stanford, University of Michigan, et cetera. But the acceptance rates most likely have hit their narrowest. It's because in 2008, there was a global recession where you might recall that the economies around the world collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
And young people were very worried. They stopped having children or they postponed it. So here we are 16 to 17 years later, and the numbers of high school students have declined. And that just means less competition. There are fewer high school students applying to university. I have to say, I live in Chappaqua, which is in Westchester County. It's Horace Greeley High School. It's one of the top high schools actually in the state, if not the country. There are the high school is probably, it's 1,100 right now, but it used to be 1,300. I don't know, maybe 7 years, maybe a dozen years ago. So there are 200 fewer students at my high school, my local high school, which is a lot, 200 fewer students getting into those schools. And I'm sure if you looked at your high school, do you go to high school in Long Island?
Yes, Valley Stream South.
If you,
yeah,
not that you have time to do this, but I'm sure that if you looked at how many students were at your school in 2007, 2008, I'm pretty sure you'll see the same numbers. So for you, you're very lucky. It will be easier a little bit for most schools. It'd be much easier. For the elite schools, it will be a little bit easier. And to be honest, it's going to be even easier next year for the juniors and subsequently the sophomores, et cetera. As you know, there's a presidential election going on, and it's a very tight election. But I think who was elected president could sway the decision making, because women, also some men, are going to go to states based on their reproductive rights, their ability to protest because of the ongoing the war in Gaza. They want secure leadership, a president that will not be. I mean, you probably know Colombia's president resigned a couple of months ago. And, last year, you probably remember when Harvard, Claudine Gay, the president at the time, gave her congressional testimony, and it was a disaster. And then she subsequently faced accusations of plagiarism, and the board, essentially the board of trustees, is called the Harvard Corporation, pressured her to resign. And as a result, early applicants to Harvard declined 17%, and the acceptance rate for early jumped from 7.56 to 8.74. And, a student might think, wow, this is a great opportunity for me to go to Harvard. But if you think about what it means to go to a university that has problems with management, it's not, university is more than just the brand. It is about the 4 years of your experience. It is about the money that you're spending for your classes. I have to say that Columbia is I visited the campus during I couldn't go on campus, but outside. In-person classes were canceled for the last couple of weeks because of the protests. These are seniors who could not, there was police presence around the perimeter, and certainly you're going to one of the best schools in the country, but you lost the happy memories for senior year. And actually the graduation was canceled, now that I remember it. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, it was.
Yeah, so I think to make, certainly these uprisings might make it, there's like a backdoor benefit for some students, but really these are difficult times for a lot of universities. So it's wise to pick campuses where you feel safe, number one, very important, and where you feel like you can thrive.
Okay.
So, and as I mentioned before, I don't know if you're a computer science person, but nearly 250,000 layoffs last year, 100,000 so far this year, more to come. The number of computer science students, it's like the new engineering has doubled in 10 years. So there are over 100,000 students studying computer science. I'm sure it's going to be even more in the next cycle. But it is about how students can have a more stable career path, because tech is evolving and changing, and certain types of tech will become obsolete. And so it is about, if you don't want to become sort of obsolete in your presence, it is about getting skills that will allow you to be flexible and adaptable, and that they could see, well, you know, her specialty is no longer what we're looking at, but look, she's great working, she's really creative, and she's very forward thinking, and she works well on teams, and here's the evidence of that. So we're going to put her on this team, or we're going to shift his line manager to this person because he needs people like this. So it really is about being interdisciplinary and learning more than one thing. It really is not about being so specific in what you are, because everything is changing. Law, medicine, everything is changing because of tech. Even though all the bearish things I said about higher ed, it still pays to go to college. Undoubtedly, that even though the enrollments have fallen, a bachelor's degree is still worth 2.8 million on average across a lifetime. And the median earnings of college degree holders is 59% higher than those that only have high school degrees. So it does pay to go to college. Maybe colleges need to better message their value, or they need to have programming that is more relevant to the workforce, whether it be more internships, more collaborations with industry. But college is still, for students who would like to go, college is still the way to go. If you're not suited for college, there's never been a better time to go to vocational school or to learn a trade, because all the carpenters and electricians and air conditioning maintenance managers and plumbers many of them are retiring, because many of them were boomers. They've all reached 65. It's physical work, so they are now retiring, and there are a lot of vacancies now in that, and they can be very high paying, and people need them. I mean, I am much more concerned if I can't get a hold of a plumber and my sink is clogged, then I need the help of an investment banker. So I think these are people that play a very big role in society that we all value when push comes to shove. With regards to AI, and I'm sure you're using AI to do your homework. It's a very useful tool for summaries, to help you with sort of to do spell checks or to help streamline your sentences. But with regards to your college essay, I can tell you that I've spoken to a number of people on admissions teams for some universities, and they are very astute to what AI feels like when they're reading it. I use a lot. I am obviously a writer and a journalist. I use ChatGPT or Perplexity for my work, but I don't use it. I don't cut and paste it and use the text. I can use it as a guideline, or if I'm trying to summarize or need bullet points. But when it comes to your college essay, I would say use it at your own peril. Even if a university is not using a GPT detecting software like Turnitin on their college essays, there's still the language that is used. Everybody, like you had mentioned earlier, that prompt, people are still using the same prompts. If people are putting those prompts into ChatGPT and everybody's cutting and pasting those essays, or even portions of them are similar, or even sentences are similar, you really do endanger your hard work and all of your academic stuff that you've done for 4 years. So I really advise that you can use it for homework to the degree that I've outlined, or maybe your school has given they've given you very precise guidelines about what they would like for you to do. But with your essay, I really don't think you should use it. Maybe brainstorming, but even that I find to be the best people to brainstorm with are your friends, people that know you. ChatGPT doesn't know you. Even your parents, you don't speak to your dad very much because he's always busy, but maybe he's got good feedback about you as a person, or you're a teacher. Maybe somebody who has a little bit of distance and but cares about you and knows what you're capable of. So that's sort of my advice after speaking to people that are on admissions teams. So a bit of some tips, and I don't know if you're planning on applying early. Only apply early decision. I'm sure you all know this is binding. And you apply early and you don't know what the financial aid package, I don't think they even offer any financial aid. And it is binding, a binding contract. And if I'm not mistaken, I think you have to sign a document. And I don't know if it's a legal document, but it is a very important document that you need to honor. But it's 4 years of your life. So I only advise to go early if this is indeed the college or university that you can't imagine, that you can't really, it's your dream school, not because it's a famous school or it's a highly ranked school, but because it really is the school that feels right. Because so many schools now, which I frankly think is a bit unfair, they recruit over 50% of their freshman class early. Claremont McKenna, 60% of their incoming class is via early decision, as is Barnard. And I'm sure there are many others that are equally high. Johns Hopkins, 30% early on, I think it's 2 rounds of ED. And the reasons why universities want to do that, number one, they capture students that really want to go to their schools, which is great. But it's also economically efficient for them because they can kind of stop recruiting. They've got 60% of their class all squared away, and they only need to allocate their recruitment money to getting 40% more seats. And universities spend a lot of money on something called yield, which is when they give out offers in the spring and they try to get students to commit to coming to their universities. And that's a very hard thing to do. If you're an Ivy League university, their yield is very high because their students want to go to those universities. Harvard's yield is very high. But for schools that are kind of middle of the road or get a lot of, good students who get into a lot of other universities, they spend a lot of money on yield. They invite students that have offers onto campus. They have parties, they have meetings, they open, they have, it costs a lot of money. So accepting students early is economically a good choice for them. I don't know if it's very fair for students who at the best can do early action because they need to see the financial aid. So this is where I believe it really does put students who need financial support at a disadvantage. This doesn't apply to seniors this year, but there are increasingly more universities that are reinstating SAT, ACTs. Stanford recently reinstated, Johns Hopkins reinstated, Cornell just reinstated a few weeks ago for the 2025-2026 admission cycle. But many of the Ivy League universities, Harvard, Brown, Dartmouth, have already reinstated. MIT reinstated quite a while ago. Part of that is because they've gotten so many applications that they really do need, or they could use another metric to vet students because they have so many qualified students applying to their universities. Another tip, think interdisciplinary, as I mentioned, and I think universities actually are, because they are concerned about graduate outcomes, they want their graduates to get jobs. They will also, I think, really stress the importance of being able to do many things, to feel comfortable doing many things rather than very comfortable doing one thing and very uncomfortable doing something else. And even for computer science, even though that obviously is a big area right now, employers would like to see that you're able to do something else besides just computer science, because if you're working at a big tech company, it really is about management or working on teams, being creative, being innovative, writing briefs, sending emails. It is about communication. So they would like to see evidence that you are not just a quote unquote nerd who is happiest just, being in front of a computer, that you can do other things as well. I have to say, though, in the age of AI, as I mentioned before about the college essay, because it is so competitive, there's so many students applying, it really is important when you're doing your applications, and not just with your essay, but with yourself, about differentiating yourself versus assimilating, because there's so many qualified students. There's so much grade inflation. There was a story in the New York Times that, I don't know, like 47% of high school seniors in the United States graduate with an A average, which is unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure that's like, it's grade inflation for a number of reasons. Teachers are very concerned about the mental health because they care and they don't want to disappoint them too much. There's pressure from parents on the school systems They demand that their kids get better grades because they know how competitive universities are. Because as I mentioned on my earlier slide, because there's so many more people applying. So you have to think deeply about makes you unique, but also how do you define success? You remember that question about about questioning a long-held belief. Why would you want to go to an Ivy League school? Like maybe the outcome that you want, you could get from going to a public school or a public university, a lower ranked school, and maybe you can save money going to the University of Edinburgh and then aim towards getting a degree in international business later, and you would have saved all the money, and you would have had an international experience and traveled through Europe and met international students who are, from all over the world. I mean, the UK, they attract students from all over the world, not just. I mean, there might be even too many international students to some degree, but you have to define about what success means, because your guidance counselor, your friends, your peers, your teachers, your parents are not going to school. You're going to you're going to campus, and you're going to have to you're going to have to sort of live the 4 years that people have set out for you. And so it's best that you make it something that you want from the start, rather than it being dictated by something. So it really is about a future. I honestly believe it. I'm not just saying that because I know how hard it is right now with competition, but it really is a future where anything is possible. So that's generally stuff from my book, but